State Senator Becca Balint is one of three Democrats, all women, who are hoping to replace Congressman Peter Welch if he's successful in his bid to move from the U.S. House of Representatives to the U.S. Senate in the general election to come in November of 2022. Whichever one of the three, Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray, State Senator Keisha Hinsdale, or Senator Balint, is ultimately successful in first winning the primary election in August, and then, if that nominee wins the general election against whichever opponent the Republicans nominate, they would be the first woman Vermont has ever sent to the U.S. Congress. Senator Balint made a stop in Arlington on February 13th to meet with voters at the Arlington Common, a new facility for art, co-working, and wellness that opened last fall. After the meet and greet, we had a chance to speak with her for a few minutes about what she took away from the conversation she had with the Arlington residents at the Common.
Yeah, so on a macro, what I heard was that we want to make sure that government, in this case federal government, state government, is working for Vermonters on the ground in these smaller communities, and that sometimes there's a disconnection between, if it's a federal grant or a program that may work in a more populated area, may work in a more populated state, but doesn't necessarily work here for us in a place like Arlington or Manchester or Bennington, where I was this morning. And so representing Windham County, that resonates with me. I certainly have seen that as well. So on the macro, that's one of the messages. And, getting down into policy, lots and lots of concerns about housing and not enough housing for Vermonters who are working and trying to live and work in the communities. They want to be able to live where they work, and they're having a really hard time finding housing that they can afford. And concerns about COVID migration, people coming up during the pandemic. And of course, we need more workers. We want to be a welcoming place, and also people feeling that pinch of how are we going to continue to create housing that is affordable for Vermonters. And so that's something that I've worked on for years here in Vermont. Still so much to do, but what I'm hearing here this morning and this afternoon are some of the reasons why I'm running, is because I do want people to be able to live where they work, because it ties into, as another woman said to me today, it ties into the whole piece around climate change. And if we really want to reduce our carbon footprint, then we need to have housing where people are doing their work. So it was a tremendous conversation. I'm going to be thinking for the next few hours about all the ways in which people were talking to me, but also talking to each other. And that was a really exciting thing for me, to see all these different parts of the community talking with each other about pieces of the puzzle and what's working and what's not. And fundamentally, people love their communities and they want it to work for regular people and for families. And that's really what I want too, as a mom and as a legislator, but also as a community member in a small town in southern Vermont. I want that too. I want my town to work for everybody. And if we can deliver federal dollars to those towns and help them with structures that they put in place, because they on the ground know more about the structures that will work for their communities, well, that's what I want to do.
One of the themes of some of the questions on the first part of the discussion seemed to be around civil discourse and kind of discordant voices within communities and statewide as well. Yep. I guess I just wondered, do you think there's a pathway that we can see to reduce that level of conflict and just sort of anger that seems to be bubbling up and all kinds of things at school board meetings and zoning board meetings and things like that, where the level of vitriol seems to be at a higher level than what we might remember from 10 or 20 years ago.
Yes, and what I want to tell people who may be watching this is, regardless of your political persuasion, you probably are feeling the same thing as your neighbor. I have heard from Republicans and Democrats and progressives and people who don't see themselves as any political persuasion, who really see themselves as either non-political or independent. And universally across Vermont, I'm hearing people who are fundamentally tired of the anger and the vitriol, and people are weary, and they want us to be focused as politicians on policy that will help them and really try to keep There is something that has been happening lately where people are very dismissive of this sense of civility. And so that word itself has almost become like a dirty word, which is so strange, because all we're trying to say is let's communicate with each other in a way that will actually help us as residents come together and solve problems. That's what we want to do. We want to take care of each other and take care of our own families. And so I have to believe there's a path. I do believe there's a path, but it does start with how we're communicating in those meetings, whether it is a select board meeting, a school board meeting, or even in our own neighborhoods. And I know that minds can be changed when people show up and literally see the person who is across from them having a difference of opinion and acknowledging we can have a difference of opinion. We can, fight like heck over this policy issue, but we don't have to demonize each other. We don't have to make it personal. And I think we have to give each other permission to do that, and we have to give each other courage to do that, because it's very difficult to be that person in a meeting speaking up and saying, you know what? This is going down a very personal path, and it doesn't have to. And when you feel like you're the only one doing that, it's very difficult. And we all, whether it's a development review board meeting, whether it is a meeting, around a school board issue, or really if it's just a community meeting about something in your neighborhood, we all can do better, and we have to do better if we're going to have a democracy that survives.
There's a long way to go between now and the August primaries, but between the departure of Senator Patrick Leahy from the U.S. Senate after nearly 50 years in office and the race to succeed him in the Senate and Welch in Congress, it'll be interesting to watch. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.